This is Sybert signing into Kane's Wrath on the map Tournament Airstrip, and that is right, we're jumping back into Kane's Wrath in a non-tournament game. Spawning on the left side as the green nod, you know him, he is Green Zero. And on the right side as the purple Steel Talons, that's right, it's Steel Talons, not just GDI, this is SteveNash, aka Phoenix, which is his current account. I'm probably going to be jumping between Phoenix and SteveNash. Just know that that is indeed the same person. Now, what was I going to mention? I don't remember. I was going to talk about something, doesn't matter too much at any rate, but yeah, we do have Nod versus Steel Talons, which is a matchup that we don't see very often. As you can see, similar kind of standard openers for both players. And of course, there's been not a lot of Kane's Wrath action going on lately. Green Zero getting the drop on that GDI squad, unfortunately, for SteveNash. And GDI squad in the south gets the drop on the Nod squad. So both teams should be able to get a fair scout off unless this GDI squad ends up intercepting. But at any rate, not a whole lot on the Kane's Wrath tab over on Game Replays in terms of replays that hasn't already been grabbed up by Green Zero. So yes, this replay is a little bit old, and it looks like we do indeed have ourselves a good old-fashioned Flame Rush. Now, we'll have to see exactly what it is, because of course there's, like, you can go Flame Rush into second Operations Center and then Reckoner with 2 Flame Squads. You can go dual Flame Tanks. You can go triple or quad Flame Tanks. Now, it's very important to notice at what point does this squad actually end up scouting the Operations Center? Right there. Okay, so we saw it. And will he actually now? Of course, he should know at this point. Wait a second, let's switch over. He should know that they're coming. So he sends the Pitbull out. Good response here by Phoenix, a.k.a. SteveNash. He's got his Pitbull out and roaming around. By the way, yeah, Green Zero taking a lot of the games there, but that is 100%. Okay, just misses. Oh, just misses that Flame Tank. This could be a very successful opener for Green Zero. Of course, Phoenix, he may not actually realize that this was either a very late first Flame Tank or that there is a second Flame Tank somewhere out. He does have his Spidey senses tingling, and he is going to be bringing this Pitbull in. Nice control there by Phoenix. Going to be keeping that Pitbull alive. That's the sort of control that you would expect to see out of these players. And, of course, this second Pitbull may be taking a little bit of damage here, but Green Zero now has a choice to make as to whether or not he chases those Pitbulls or whether or not he goes straight for the building. Titans are now out. They should be able to crush those Flame Tanks if they get within range, and this expansion from Phoenix could very well be under fire relatively shortly. He needs to make sure that he keeps this Pitbull on. Oh, that Pitbull actually goes down, so that's embarrassing. A second Pitbull goes down. These Flame Tanks have almost paid for themselves. Of course, they haven't quite paid for themselves just yet, in the fact that this one technically hasn't killed anything since this squad over here got the kill, but still 2 Pitbulls, not too bad. If he can get a refinery, maybe even if he gets a power plant, it might be worth it, but definitely the refinery, $3 grand, and that much economic disadvantage that he would be at would definitely be great for Phoenix, but it is not meant to be. We'll be forcing a little bit of repairs there, and a later expansion here for Green Zero, so I'm not sure if that actually worked out. He did kind of force. Oh, actually, the Reckoner is exactly what Green Zero needs. He's going to be able to get a power plant at the very least. Won't be able to probably get too much else than that, but we'll have to see. There is 1 Rifleman squad already here, and the power plant will not actually end up going down unless Green Zero properly focus fires. Even so, the crushing from Phoenix is actually just too good. So Green Zero started out not too bad, ended up not too good. However, the fortunate thing is that these extra 2, 3, 4 Titans that got produced, and it looks like one of the refineries ended up getting sold off, have caused a little bit of an economic disadvantage to be swung into the favor of Phoenix. However, Phoenix does have his expansion out a lot earlier, so that does definitely even things up. And Green Zero is going to be transitioning in a couple of harvesters. There is the 3rd Tib Spike in the middle of the map, which is kind of in a contested location, but it hasn't actually been grabbed by either one of these players, and Green Zero is looking to secure it at some point in this match. The blue Tib is going to be siphoned a little bit here by Green Zero, not quite by Phoenix. Although Phoenix might get lucky if he pulls Pitbull over here and be able to catch this Harvester. Or actually, can you actually crush a stealth Harvester? Green Zero is going to be keeping that safe, at least for now. third harvester does get pulled down. Secret Shrine is going to be on the way. Green Zero going for a bit of a man spam transition. Not too big of a deal, but he does need to make sure that he keeps an eye on his enemy's unit composition, because if he hardcore switches into Wolverines, of course, then this unit composition from Green Zero won't be doing very well, doing very much. Second Hand of Nod does get deployed right on the ground, and Pit Bulls are going to be countered very hard by the rocket troopers that are being produced by Green Zero. On the top right corner, Buggy going in for the scout while in the middle of the map. Those Pit Bulls finally being put to some use. However, the Harvester does escape with about a half load of blue Tiberium. Definitely not worth it there for Green Zero, although he did save himself a little bit of Tiberium on this field, but the travel distance of that Harvester didn't really make that trip worth it. At least I wouldn't think so. Command post does go down, and dual airfield hammerheads are currently on the way. A good response, maybe not the best response, but definitely a good response overall. We'll have to see how hard Green Zero goes into anti-air spam, because if he goes pretty hard into SAM turrets, then those hammerheads won't really be worth it. But if Green Zero doesn't go very hard into anti-air SAM turrets, well, just anti-air in general, then those hammerheads have a lot of potential to swing in when Green Zero isn't watching, especially with AP ammo. And of course, Steel Talons, they don't have super good infantry. It's not like they can get zone heads, but they can get rock heads. Of course, they still do have rocket troopers. And of course, you can throw rifleman squads inside of them as well. This Harvester, it was ill-fated. Ill-fated is, I think, a good term to use, and we do have approximately 6 hammerheads going to be moving out. 7 and 8 are on the way, potentially 9 and 10, or maybe just 9, maybe 10 will be coming a little bit later, but at any rate, a fair amount of hammerheads, a fair amount of pit bulls, a nice unit composition, although it is a little bit light in terms of the armor. The Titans are a fair bit behind, and of course, this unit composition can't really directly engage the forces of Green Zero. They're coming in for a pretty big swing here. Nice control of these hammerheads, and what I mean by that is he's double-clicking left and right at the same time to kind of get an arrangement of a line to avoid splash damage. So, I mean, by that, I mean, he didn't mess up terribly. So good on Phoenix for doing the correct thing in terms of unit control. We'll be going in for the V-35 transport. I believe it's V-35, and then it's carry-all for Nod. But V-35 Ox transport for the Scout. Didn't really get a whole lot of information. Hammerheads do escape the majority of them. I think he may have saved all of them. As you can see, it's a little bit of a grab bag of Skittles in terms of health there, spread all across. Now, both players are going to be drawing up their main fields relatively soon here. Green Zero already pretty much packing up and moving on, and of course, after this, he needs to establish himself on a third field and maybe even contest the third field of his opponent, as the Harvesters in the north may just go ahead and finish siphoning off that base, or siphoning off the Tiberium in the north, rather. Wow, that was a very useful scout. That one Pitbull got a ridiculous amount of knowledge. Going to be calling in a Orca strike on the tech lab. On top of that, I think he may have also spotted a stealth tank. I mean, he saw the MCV. A huge amount of information was just gathered there by Phoenix. However, on the right side, we do have, I'm assuming, just that buggy swinging around here again, and then the SAM turrets. We do go ahead and deal a little bit with the Orcas, and is it going to be, I imagine, I'm not actually sure what he's going for. He could be going for laser capacitors for some sort of Scorpion tank transition. He could be going for EMP coils if he wants to take down the Marv more easily, or he could be going for TIB core missiles, but of course that doesn't affect too much here. I mean, unless they change something and now infantry get the upgrades. But I'm actually kind of curious as to what exactly Green Zero, it is TIB core, so he is going for the anti-air powers, which of course will help him deal with those hammerheads that much more easily. Juggernaut's out on the field, the Marv as well, and of course Grenadiers are going to be a nice addition to the army. However, nice control there by Green Zero, evacuating the infantry out. He's really just held on to this heavy infantry composition. Of course, it's cheap. It's not exactly mobile, but a couple of stealth tanks, a nice move here for sure, and of course that is probably the reason why he ended up getting that TIB core missile, because it does indeed help those stealth tanks. A couple more volleys to finish off this extra heavy Harvester, and then he can get on out of there. As one Orca does show up, he has to be careful. Green Zero doesn't want to be losing too many of these stealth tanks. Loses one. He has cleaned up 3 Harvesters, but those Harvesters weren't particularly important. There is a bit of Tiberium there, but those are not the most important Harvesters of all time. A couple of more rockets going to be smashing in here. Up north, something going on. Goodbye, stealth tank. It's just infantry taking a little bit of latent damage from that bit of Tiberium that they're standing on. One refinery does get established. More disruption towers. I almost called them secret shrines. But there is a second secret shrine getting established. I guess he sold the other one off that was over here. At the same time, going to be throwing down an additional Tiberium refinery, not actually an ore refinery, although I do think EMP coils would be a good choice for Green Zero. It doesn't look like he's actually going to be upgrading that at this current time. In the north, going to be sending another stealth tank out. Another nice move here by Green Zero. Just going in for those little bits of counterattacks can end up being what makes the difference, although Phoenix is doing well to control his hammerheads, and he's definitely going for that big power army of GDI, which in this case, the nice flat open map would be really warranting itself to maybe a bike buggy, heavy harassment sort of orientated play style that Green Zero could be going for with the Nod faction. There is, I think, Redemption, a support power we don't see very often. Should be getting some Awakened squads out of all of these infantry that are ending up dying, and I guess that's his EMP solution for these units, and a great move here by Green Zero. If he can actually get some solid EMPs, he may be able to crush through this army, but for now, Phoenix is actually going to be holding the line relatively well. Another attack on the right side here. I'm not exactly sure what was happening, but it looks like Pitbulls in the north are going to be harassing some of those hammerheads. In the south are going to be getting taken out by these infantry coming in an orbital. I don't know if I agree with that. That's really $4 grand for killing that little bit of infantry. I don't know that's necessarily worth it unless Green Zero walks right into it with his reinforcements. At the same time, the hammerheads have pretty much evaporated, but it has bought a ridiculous amount of time for SteveNash to go ahead and rebuild up some of those defenses, get watchtowers. He's already got AP ammo, which means those watchtowers are going to be that much more effective at dealing with infantry. Pitbulls are going to be swinging on down south, but this base, again, these harvester harassments aren't the biggest deal. These are not exactly high saturation bases with a ton of Tiberium. Losing these harvesters at this point is not as big of a deal as it would have been 10-15 minutes ago. Orca's going to be coming in. I'm not sure exactly what they were going for there. I guess the Marv, maybe if Phoenix is able to push in here and just basically Marvest all of this Tiberium, because you don't necessarily want to Marvest your own field. If you can harvest it, it's more efficient. You get more money that way. But if you can Marvest your opponent's field, that's kind of a win-win sort of a situation. You inefficiently harvest their field, and, you know, as long as you're not planning on taking it later, it's a good game all around. And low power mode for Green Zero, but he quickly fixes that. Going to be selling off of that. War Factory is going to be keeping the refinery. Of course, he can sell off the power plant if he really needs to, but hopefully he is going to be able to do this. And gotta hand it to Phoenix. Counterattacks are pretty okay. They're not the best thing ever, but they're pretty alright, which sometimes pretty alright is enough to even the score. Oh! Those Spectre shots were absolutely ridiculous. Nice control of the Orcas. They're dodging in and out when and where he can, although it wasn't quite perfect control. Reverse move, I don't know if I agree with that. That's a lot of damage on that Marv. Just from those last couple of seconds that you saw, that Rage Gen does fire off a nice move here by Green Zero, but Phoenix, is he going to be able to actually save the Marv? No! He is not. The Marv does go down. The Behemoths on the back end of things are going to be going for the advance, but Behemoths by themselves, they're not really an offensive unit by themselves. They're more of a support unit. There is going to be the... Well, never mind. There's actually nothing there because they all just got eliminated, but there was the holographic army, or the... whatever it's actually called. Shockwave Artillery potentially getting called down here. I'm not sure what support power that actually was, but it certainly was one of them. I guess Orca Strike could be what it is, but that was a waste of a couple hundred credits there. Oh, Spectres, one of them does go down. A second one almost getting eliminated, and a third taking some more damage also. However, Behemoths are stacked quite well, which means if we end up getting some Spectre shots off, it could do some pretty hefty damage to those Behemoths. Hammerheads, they're getting a little jumpy here, although Green Zero has had some nice harassment opportunities a couple of minutes ago. He hasn't really done anything else, and we'll have to see if he's able to hold off this main attack, because if he loses this main kind of front of his army, he doesn't have a whole lot to fall back on. Although he is starting to chip away at these Behemoths, we could end up seeing some engineers come out from Phoenix to go ahead and deal with these husks. Green Zero would do well to go ahead and target down the husks to eliminate them if at all possible. And more Green Zero is going to be pushing forward, so Phoenix will have to see if he's able to hold this line, hold this army at the front here. Of course, he could try to throw rifleman squads inside of the heavy harvesters. We'll have to see if that's actually going to be making a difference or not. Again, something Shockwave Artillery firing off. I wasn't sure what support power it was, but it is going to be Shockwave Artillery. A lot of the infantry getting cleaned up by the Hammerheads, and this Redeemer does still stand. I don't know if it'll be actually enough. Nice moves here by Green Zero, focus firing down the Behemoths so that they can't actually do a whole lot else once the man-span army has pretty much been cleaned up. Green Zero doesn't have a whole lot left, but the Behemoth's still going to be dealing a lot of damage to the Redeemer, and Green Zero wants to nullify that as much as possible. One more Spectre shot will be eliminating that. Also killing an Engineer, 500 credits down the drain there for Phoenix. is going to be going for the Marv for those extra bit of repairs. Nope, changes his mind, ends up going for the Behemoth. A couple of more shots from these Spectres could actually come crashing down and kill an Engineer. Not actually sure if they did. Nope, the Engineer does still survive, but still, that's 1,000 credits in Engineers, which may very well end up getting eliminated. I would like to see these Pitbulls come back into use just for another scout, and then potentially picking off some of these buildings and important tech structures on the back end of things for Phoenix. Harassment is definitely something that is very crucial for both sides. Maybe even a little bit more so for Green Zero, since Phoenix hasn't been taking very much damage, although Phoenix definitely needs to start harvesting some of this Tiberium once again. He does have harvesters down here in the south, but he did have an army of harvesters that got pulled off of the line. I'm not exactly sure where they all went. Might actually have to end up rebuilding some of his harvesters if he's lost too many. Could sell off both of those watchtowers and then go ahead for the harvester transition. Ooh, Green Zero dropping the ball on some of these harvesters. He needs to actually go ahead and re-expand up north to his main field, to his original main base, and potentially even rebuild from some infrastructure there if he needs to. Because he doesn't have too much Tiberium left here, and it looks like he doesn't have too much Tiberium left here, although he does have 3 harvesters, and this will keep 3 harvesters in business for a little while. Stealth tanks coming in. That's the harassment a little bit there that I was talking about. Of course, you have to be careful. Stealth tanks are expensive. They can pick off a Behemoth really quite easily, so if Green Zero gets the shots off, then that would be absolutely fantastic. Might go ahead for that refinery, although as long as one refinery still stands, then this base can be harvested. Could get some shots off on the Marv, but I wouldn't recommend it. Oh! Okay, so those are 2... I'm not actually sure if any of these are real. Come to think of it, they do have upgrades listed right there, and I don't know if holograms have upgrades listed. I don't remember if that's one of the tells of the holograms, but... So I guess those 2 stealth tanks were free. I'm pretty sure the other one that died wasn't. Or did another one die? I'm not actually sure if one in this group died. Another Spectre does get eliminated. 2 more raining fire down from behind the army. More and more Green Zero is going to be swinging up north, and these are indeed real stealth tanks going to be going for the kill on that refinery. A couple of Orcas are here. One rocket does fire off. Sonic Stealth Pulse, what is that actually called? Sensor Pod is probably what ended up going down, or no, actually it's the ability. Pulse Scan. That's what it's called. Pulse Scan ended up going down there. More EMPs coming down from Green Zero is going to be keeping that Marv at bay, but at the same time, Behemoths are so good. Goodbye, Redeemer, as it does fall in the fires of the GDI player, and Orcas showing up to kill infantry because, you know what, why not at this point? Might as well use your Orcas for something. Pitbulls coming in. Mortars have been purchased, and Phoenix, has he finally overcome the giant of Green Zero's infantry army enough to push on forward? More stealth tanks going to be pressing forward. These are probably real stealth tanks. That's a waste of missiles, a huge waste of missiles overall. But Green Zero, after that first waste, doing a better job of splitting his missiles to make sure that they are getting more use for their truce. Good rhyme. Good rhyme right there. That is pro quality stuff. Looks like another stealth tank may have ended up getting eliminated, but Green Zero does still have 3 more on the field, so he could end up splitting those up into 2 stealth tank attack groups and go, oh, that sensor pod so close to getting eliminated. Pulse Scan will reveal stealth tanks for a little while there. He's trying to just track down those stealth tanks to eliminate them, which of course would be super nice. Green Zero at the same time may be able to clean up one of these airfields. I mean, then there's only 1 airfield left, and you can only have 4 Orcas, so that does cut down on the potential Orca numbers. I don't think it would actually cause any problems just yet, because I think there's only 4 Orcas, yeah. But now there's 5, so actually eliminating that airfield would be even better now. Look at that. Hopefully you can't hear the garage door opener in the background. The garage door, rather. I'm in the room that's just above the garage, so every time it opens, it makes a really loud noise. Couple of power plants going down. Green Zero, he can't really make headway on the front line, so if his only option is harassment, then he needs to make sure that he is doing that as well as he can. Redeemer is now back out. 1 engineer is standing by. 2nd engineer may very well be produced relatively soon here. Yeah, only 1 engineer. We're standing by. 4 now. Could go ahead and drop down could actually end up selling off the Redeemer Engineering Facility, go for the Black Hand Squad, or he'll end up producing 1 out of that extra hand. If not, either or really doesn't matter too much. And Phoenix is going to be going for the Marvestein. I actually couldn't remember what it was called, but he's going to be Marvestein out that field. It's been a little while since I ended up casting Kane's Wrath. Not sure what happened to the other stealth tanks. Hopefully they didn't get eliminated for Green Zero's sake. And 6 Orcas is a powerful amount of Orcas. You can do a lot of damage with 6 Orcas. 2 stealth tanks do still remain. One of them on kind of low HP, about half HP there. Hopefully it doesn't get eliminated too quickly again for Green Zero's sake. Of course, Phoenix would love to just clean up those stealth tanks. They can be so annoying. But Green Zero, if he's able to get some nice harassment out in the rest of this game, that could end up spelling a victory for him, as Phoenix is just making a slow, solid push. And we've seen this happen well, you know, not necessarily a ton, but GDI does indeed love slow, strong pushes that just eliminate so much. A couple more stealth tanks on the south side. I'm not sure if that makes 4 or if my eyes deceive me and I was actually just looking at the same stealth tanks that were up north. It looks like they may actually be the same stealth tanks. But I'm going to be eliminating one of the behemoths, and that it will at the very least force Phoenix to kill his own husk, unless he wants to leave it there for Green Zero to capture. But the MCV is packed up, and there's probably not going to be an engineer headed out over to that husk for too much longer. Of course, that means the husk may just end up getting eliminated. But for now, we do have a little bit of a lull here. A couple more stealth tanks are going to be getting produced by Green Zero. And this refinery is up in the north, going to be allowing a Green Zero to harvest away that field. Could go ahead and long distance harvest that blue field. Of course, Phoenix could be doing the same thing if he would reestablish himself in the north, which, I mean, he does still have a power plant and actually just sold off a power plant. So he should be able to, you know, run this rifleman squad up here and say, oh, hey, there's like $20,000 worth of TIB there, or 10,000. I should probably go get that. That would be a good thing. Oh, one stealth tank gets eliminated really quite quickly. A second and a third, I think all 3 did go down. Redemption once again going to be firing off, but the behemoths, kind of the MVP of Phoenix, just firing off so many shots, killing a lot of Redeemers, and by a lot I think I mean 1, but still doing a lot of damage to the Redeemer. There's the EMPs that Green Zero needs, but is he actually going to be able to continue them? Rage Dun will be locking down and confusing a lot of these units. Both of the production facilities are gone, which is a nice win for Green Zero and just pushing back Phoenix's forces. But after that, is there going to be enough power in Green Zero's forces to deal with the army? Heavy harvesters coming off the line to deal with these attacking forces, and the EMPs are not good enough. The EMPs were solid, but really when you don't have too much DPS to follow the EMPs up with, then it doesn't matter how many EMPs you really do have. If you just can't kill the units, they don't do very much good. Another Titan will be falling, but behemoths are out on the field, and of course they have to be dealt with at some point for Green Zero. Otherwise, they'll just do untold amounts of damage. And actually right now, oh, those Orcas. Maybe the Orcas are actually the MVP. One of them does go down, but if you're trading an Orca for a Redeemer, the GDI player will do that all day, every day. A Hammerhead also getting eliminated, so starting to get back some of the worth of that Redeemer, but overall Green Zero not going to be very happy with that exchange. Losing a second Redeemer in this game, could be going for a third Redeemer to go ahead and again get that super tank unit out that allows him to just use these lower cost infantry. I would like to see Green Zero potentially mix up things a little bit here. If he goes for like a big bike buggy transition and then just never directly engages, that's a potential for a winner. Now, of course, you still have to deal with the air army and make sure that you don't get caught out of position, which can be very deadly for small amounts of bike buggy. Because if you end up not actually having very many units, and then you get caught between like aircraft over in one area, and then even just behemoths in another, you got to keep moving to stay out of range of the behemoths, and hopefully you don't get cleaned up by the aircraft. Of course, if you're bike heavy, you typically don't have to worry about that, but stealth tanks, definitely a good choice. Could be going for the command host, going to eliminate that, and then scoot on out of there. I don't know that he'll be able to get too many more kills. Sonic Pulse from the Orcas could be rather deadly to these stealth tanks, but Green Zero, he's got blue tib. And that is a huge deal. I mean, if you think about how much money is in each of these those harvesters, I think it's 2,800 in each. Yeah, if my memory serves me correctly, yeah, 2,800. So that's like $7 grand, $7.5, something like that. Ridiculous amounts of money already just being pretty much unloaded straight into Green Zero's bank. And then he still has, you know, double that out on the field. So probably getting between 14 and 20,000 credits in just that one field. And of course, that's money that's getting pumped mostly right back into his army. He hasn't really had to rebuild that infrastructure. He has had to rebuild the operations center, but after that, I mean, the tech lab is still standing. He's still got the upgrades. Of course, he hasn't actually gotten any more upgrades, so it's not all that useful. But he has, of course, maintained that tier 3 tech, which is important for rebuilding Redeemers as often as he has to do that. At this point, Phoenix should have spotted this field. I mean, if he hasn't been paying attention, he may not have noticed that he lost a couple of units up this way, and he may be very curious as to where they went. A little bit too late there on the sensor pod, as the stealth tanks are actually on a different part of this little area, but maybe another sensor pod will be getting thrown down here. The orcas are going to be maybe fast enough to eliminate one. No, they don't actually even get one stealth tank, although the orca strike almost gets an additional stealth tank. One stealth tank will go down, and Green Zero may just have to suicide in like one stealth tank to get the kill on that airfield. I mean, the stealth tanks have probably paid for themselves. Maybe not, especially if he loses a second one. They probably won't have paid for themselves at all. It's always hard for me to estimate how close a unit is to reaching like efficiency of just a flat efficiency ratio of killing enough to cover its own cost. But it's of course something that you have to take into consideration as a player. Are you actually using your units efficiently? And if not, is your eco good enough to support that sort of inefficiency? But Green Zero, he is really committing pretty hard to this heavy infantry composition, but you gotta hand it to him. I mean, he's not playing Black Hand, but he's still going pretty heavy into infantry. And if only he had some EMP buggies, this engagement may end up going a little bit differently. Looks like he does have a sensor pod on top of the Marv there, so it is going to be revealing stealth in a small area around it. But as it turns out, militant squads are actually pretty terrible at killing just about everything. And of course, that's just never very good. Anytime you're bad at killing something, it's never good to, you know, face a Redeemer, or face a Marv, an epic unit even. And 2 or 3 stealth tanks going down. Not going to be feeling very good for Green Zero. Unfortunately for him, he did lose those stealth tanks, but as long as he's rebuilt his infantry army, he's going to be doing all right, as long as he doesn't end up just losing them. And, I mean, he could end up losing a lot of them to just being crushed, but for now he is going to be moving out across the map. Of course, moving quite quickly. They are maybe going to be able to eliminate the airfield, but the MCV is now deployed, and without actually a lot of protection, this MCV is definitely going to be in a risk. We'll have to see if Green Zero is actually able to discover that the MCV is just up north. He's going for the airfield straight away. Awakened squads are going to be spawning relatively soon here, which means EMPs are going to be locking down the watchtowers. That's a relatively good orca strike, not a great one. Actually, it may not even be good, because it looked like it did more damage than it actually did. It looks like one of these squads, or a couple of these squads rather, have actually discovered that the Conyard is up there. Power plants going down, the watchtowers have fallen, and a couple of Wolverines are getting eliminated. But at the same time, again, Green Zero, he's got these big, powerful armies, but they're so flimsy. And actually, I guess that refinery is getting locked down, so not a whole lot of refining that it's going to be doing. But the behemoths behind the army, you know, they're doing a fair amount of damage. In the north here, we do have the MCV taking a little bit of damage, a little bit more scratch damage, really. And those are the EMPs that we're looking to see. A couple more EMPs on top of the Wolverines would be absolutely fantastic, but the rockets will be dealing with those Wolverines. As you can see, they did not do a whole lot. And my word, this is just a ludicrous amount of EMPs. You gotta hand it to Green Zero. He's actually doing a pretty good job with this infantry army. Phoenix actually did a surprisingly good job of just eliminating a lot of that army with what he had, but that redemption support power is so good, apparently. You don't normally see it used all that often, so it's kind of unfortunate that you don't see it that often, considering how good it can be if you have a heavy infantry army. Green Zero is doing something a little bit unusual in that he's sticking with a heavy infantry-based composition with Nod. Now, a lot of times you do see that with Black Hand, or at least some sort of a man-spam transition, even if it's not the meat of the army. But with Nod, you're more likely to see heavy Scorpion tanks, you're more likely to see heavy bike buggy. Occasionally you'll see avatars, but they're just not used too much. Green Zero, on the other hand, does need to move on his base somewhere and find some more Tiberium. I'm not actually sure where his MCV has gone to at this point. He may have actually sold it off, or he's going for a base push, as you can see, which supporting with stealth tanks may actually be a really good idea, because if he's able to draw the fire away from the front lines or onto the front lines while his stealth tanks sneak around back and do some massive damage, this could be a great move here for Green Zero. Goodbye airfield, and the MCV may be the next target. And of course, Green Zero, he doesn't need to buy a ton of time. He's still got a Redeemer out on the field, and this multi-pronged attack may actually be enough to win Green Zero the game. And it may not be necessarily a case of where Green Zero just outright wins everything, but it could be a case of where he just eliminates all of the buildings of his opponent and wins kind of that way, sort of the secondary way of not just winning the game straight up, but instead just murdering all of the buildings. If he's able to throw down a Hand of Nod, as you can see, he's not building anything, he's just buying time. He is going to be cutting and running with his... Well, never mind, he actually doesn't have to do anything down here, but he's cutting and running with his stealth tanks to go ahead and hit down south, but there's actually nothing happening down south, and Green Zero transforming from a good position to a not-so-good position is now Phoenix, just by forcing away those stealth tanks, keeping his MCV alive, and now pushing on the main base and the refinery, which won't be a refinery for too much longer. He's, of course, transformed his own position, and Green Zero is now in a tough spot. Not necessarily... Okay, almost an unwinnable spot. He did drop a crane, and he did drop a war factory, so he's still got the potential for an MCV rebuild and, of course, re-expansion if it comes to that. But for the time being, he's got a little bit of eco going. He actually just has a refinery, and that's kind of the bad point of if you see a refinery, it doesn't always mean that there's harvesters there. You normally would expect it, but it doesn't always mean that. He could end up going in for the con yard. I don't know if it would be worth it to end up... I don't know if he would suicide the Redeemer, but if he ended up going for that con yard, he would probably suicide the Redeemer. Looks like a couple of rocket squads will be taking some damage, and for a second I thought that was a commando, as the fire rate was just a little bit weird. It looked and sounded faster than it actually was, and it was just a single unit, so for a second, for just a moment, I thought we were going to have the excitement of a commando, but that would be tier 3 plus an armor, and we just do not have that from this point by Phoenix. Now, Venom's Raider Buggy. Interesting composition. EMP coils has indeed been purchased, but laser capacitors has not. So I'm curious as to what the meat of Green Zero's army is going to be. It could be stealth tanks. That could be what he relies on to actually do the damage. Of course, now one thing about buggies is they kind of are... They've got great utility in the EMP sort of nature of them, and they're alright at killing infantry, but they're not great at killing Titans or Behemoths. Actually, does he have any Behemoths left? Or, you know, Marv or Titans, so really just Marv and Titans is what they're really bad at killing. But as long as he's mixing in stealth tanks, mixing in rocket troopers, whatever it may be, he just needs something to deal that damage, and we're starting to see both players rebuild a little bit here, as it's still a pretty dicey situation for both players. That's a lot of infantry fire onto this harvester with a surprisingly low amount of damage when you see that much, those many bullets flying towards that harvester. And there we go. It's a Green Zero in the late game. He's going for, of course, the classic, like, 30-minute Tib Spike capture. There we go, 500 credits to Green Zero, as well as 10 a second or whatever it is. I don't actually remember. It is 10 a second, but Buggy's cleaning up a single pit bull. And again, that pit bull doing some pretty good scouting. So Phoenix, he scouts, you know, like the 34-minute mark, and then also at, like, the early minute mark, wherever the other pit bull scout was that he scouted with. But in between those 2 points, not a lot of scouting by Phoenix. Of course, he didn't need a ton. There's the MCV rebuild by Green Zero. And I don't know, maybe potentially he even held that MCV off a little while. Probably not. But until the Pitbull ended up going down, he may have ended up holding off that MCV from coming out. Still no laser capacitors, so this clearly is not going to be the brunt of the army. But we do, of course, have Venoms in the air to do... Actually, I'm not sure where they are. They're over here. So they're just going to be doing a little bit of anti-infantry and a little bit of anti-air sort of damage. Green Zero re-expanding to the south part of the map. And Phoenix, he's just chilling along the top side here. Looks like Rage Gen may have fired off. No, it's actually going to be a commando. Oh, that commando. Looks like she didn't do a whole lot. That's rather unfortunate for Green Zero. He is going to be moving in with the Redeemer, which normally... bad idea unless you've got a counterattack, but it doesn't really look like there's going to be much of a counterattack going on. He is going to be going for the Harvesters, which isn't the worst thing in the world. Could end up getting a couple of pit bulls as well, but without shockwave artillery, Steel Talons really doesn't have very many options for EMP. I believe shockwave artillery is their only option for EMP, which means this Redeemer could end up going down just due to the sheer number of pit bulls versus the getting shut down by EMP. Although he will be doing a little bit of damage. I mean, he killed off like one Harvester with the help of Rage Gen. We'll be killing a couple of Titans as well. I don't know that this is actually worth it. Stealth tanks in the south, that's the counterattack that Green Zero needs to distract his opponent from. As you can see, Pitbull is going to be slowly chipping away at the Redeemer. And Green Zero, the king of killing Redeemers in this game. But pretty solid play overall throughout this entire match from both players. Not really huge mistakes, although... you know, unit compositions maybe could have been mixed up a little bit here. We may have ended up seeing potentially some railguns coming out from Phoenix for a little bit of a harder hitting army. But at any rate, he's been relying more on the Marv, and he's, of course, got that super NG Marv rocking right now. 4 engineers, a lot of healing power for that Marv. And pretty much the tankiest unit in the game. If it's not, I'm not sure what out-tanks it, but at that point, when you've got self-healing, a self-healing super tank, it's hard to beat that in terms of tanking ability. Of course, with this many EMP buggies, it can get shut down by not too many infantry. Of course, you just need solid EMPs to just repeatedly lock it down, and then, of course, it doesn't really matter how much damage you've got going on it, as long as it's enough to overcome the engineers. Stealth tanks in the north getting pulled back, and it looks like Spectre fire from back here. An elite Spectre snuck all the way across the map. Is he going heroic? No, he's not. I was going to zoom in, but he didn't actually go heroic. Hopefully, we'll end up seeing him go heroic at some point. Pit bulls coming in behind the army. Of course, not a good composition to deal with heavy infantry. And again, Redemption is going to be firing off on the back end of that army. And goodbye, Spectre. Unfortunately, we won't really see you get heroic, I shouldn't think, as it does get whittled away by that Titan infantry. Going to be moving forward. Can the EMPs actually lock down the Marv? One EMP does lock it down. The Spectre does get eliminated before going heroic. Pitbulls are going to be coming in to save this. They should be focusing on the buggies to eliminate that sort of EMP ability. The Redeemer is back out on the field. It looks like a lot of infantry getting killed, but mostly those are Pitbull guys flying out from the Pitbulls quite hilariously. But they did a pretty good job of cleaning up the infantry with their mortars. One rocket trooper does still remain, and he's kind of the hero rocket trooper, but really, he didn't earn himself much other than a fancy death in a VOD. That's all he really earned himself. Stealth tanks in the north, though, could be going for the Titans as well as the Harvesters, just to eliminate the kind of only thing in the north that's going to actually be killing the stealth tanks. But a second Redeemer, more like fourth Redeemer, is out on the map. And Green Zero, unfortunately, only has the Operations Center, which, as far as I remember, doesn't actually provide build radius, which means if he wants to harvest that field, it's going to be long distance, or he's going to have to reestablish himself there. Could actually go ahead and send a Harvester over here. Vertigo sells off the airfield. I guess he rebuilt it down here. Indeed, he did, just to keep it kind of safe, closer to the home, and, you know, just making sure that he can protect that airfield quite well. Pitbulls in the north going for that Operations Center, and again, counterattacks are something that I actually love seeing players do, and sometimes on big flat open maps like this, you more have seen Nod thrive with going for big counterattack moves. Again, Bike Buggy, a very popular composition, especially for players like Technique. And, I mean, sometimes you even see fancy flame tank gimmicks like we saw in the beginning of this game. Maybe it would be good for Green Zero to try that out once again. A couple of flame tanks along the south side of the map, and then, you know, distracting around somewhere in here, maybe even on the north side with the rest of his army, or even doing the opposite, of course, flame tanks in the north and then pushing on down to the south. But one thing you do have to hand to Phoenix, whether or not you like his play in this game, is he's been doing a pretty good job of defending on multiple locations, making sure that he's keeping units back at home just to defend pretty much every angle and make sure that he's not taking too much damage just lazily and, you know, kind of forgetting about stuff and leaving it alone. And then soon dead Harvesters. Green Zero has been able to sneak in here and there to do harassment all around the place, but really, I mean, Titans all are up here, and of course that is something you have to factor in, but he's of course got the Marv down here. This Marv has been camping down here for quite a while since he was moving his MCV down here, so he's just doing a pretty good job. SteveNash, that is doing a pretty good job of defending all areas. Now, is it perfect? No, of course not, or Green Zero wouldn't have been able to sneak in time and time again with his stealth tanks to do bits of damage, but really, it's not like overwhelming amounts of harass. As much as I would like to end up seeing that, it's not that, and Green Zero, as much as he may be trying to end the game with harass and just get crazy kills with stealth tanks, he is unfortunately not able to do that because the defense from Phoenix is just a little bit too strong. Pitbull's moving out on the north side, going for a little bit of harassment for himself. Stealth tanks. Whoa, that was close, because now the Pitbulls do know that the stealth tanks are there, but 5 stealth tanks are going to be able to eliminate Pitbulls really quite easily, and if you're good enough on your control, you can focus down the Pitbulls basically individually and eliminate all of them in one go when you outnumber them with stealth tanks. And this War Factory or the Refinery could be made pretty short work of. The Titans also getting cleaned up relatively quickly there. Ooh, trades 2 stealth tanks. I believe that's 1,800 credits per stealth tank. I'm not 100% sure, but 1 Titan, definitely not worth as much. A couple of Venoms, they get their kill on that Pitbull. It's kind of unusual to see Pitbulls that far out And those 2 Venoms that were produced earlier in this game, I'm not sure if that was a mistake by Green Zero. Maybe he meant to make a couple of Vertigos and instead ended up making Venoms. But at any rate, he does have the Venoms now and is going to be using them. Tailgun of the Vertigos could actually be used here to do a little bit of damage to that Orca, but of course that would reveal the Vertigos, not the Venoms, would reveal the Vertigos to Phoenix. Vertigo's surprisingly good at dealing with Marvs as well. Just a little bit of a tip there for those of you who didn't know. Also good for killing Harvesters. So Orcas are good at killing, or not Orcas, but Firehawks are good at killing buildings. Vertigos are good at killing units. Kind of, not opposites there, but, you know, kind of differences between the two. And once again, Redemption being used pretty much on the front lines. Can he actually catch the Marv with the EMPs? Because that is a lot of Wolverines. Oh my word, that is a ton of Wolverines. Also a fair amount of Militant Squads, which means there will be a fair amount of Awakened Squads. Eventually, the EMPs are landing. They're not spectacular, but they are pretty alright. Wolverines getting eliminated one by one. The Venoms on the front lines absorbing shots from the Pitbulls, which I guess is the best that you can expect from them, since there isn't a whole lot for them to shoot. They do have a couple of Rocket Squads that they can shoot down, but really not doing too much. And these two players so scrappy in this game, just back and forth constantly. An EMP does get whiffed there, but just barely. Green Zero pushing on forward, but is he actually going to be able to kill Phoenix? Because both of these players have been coming seemingly to just the jaws of defeat, and then whoever's at the jaws of defeat just makes a comeback and stabilizes, gets himself back in the game, and then takes the other guy to the jaws of defeat, pretty much beating each other within an inch of their lives. But Green Zero may actually finally be able to stomp down the Conyard and Infantry Army, winning overall in the long run. So Green Zero really committing pretty hard to Redeemer, Rocket Squads, and Stealth Tanks, and it ended up working out. Phoenix has been defeated. Green Zero winning out in the end, and I definitely didn't see that one coming until the last couple of minutes there, since Phoenix looked like he had a chance throughout the majority of that game, and definitely at a couple of points there I thought he had the game. So whoa, was that actually, that did not feel like 41 minutes, but apparently that was a 41-minute long game. So I hope you enjoyed it. That was a ton of fun to watch, a lot of action. And of course, as you can see, with a heavy infantry composition, you pay the price in the unit kill-to-death ratio, but Green Zero did a couple of things that were rather nice. One of them, economics. You want to see that blue tib spike? It's probably right here, or maybe it's down here, but probably right about there. It seemed to be roughly in the middle of that map. But as you can see, whatever Green Zero did right here got himself a nice eco spike, because they were pretty neck and neck for the majority of the time. Green Zero ends up passing him there and stays ahead for the rest of that game. The increased money that Green Zero got over Phoenix, which again, 41 minutes, so it wasn't a huge deal for most of that game, but it also doesn't really start until about the 20-minute mark. I mean, Phoenix was ahead, then Green Zero caught up, and then Green Zero took the lead somewhere around the 20-minute mark. So the last 21 minutes of the game are where the majority of this discrepancy that we see in the resources actually comes into play. Green Zero constantly remaxing out those army. Yes, are they infantry? I mean, he created 400 units. That is a ridiculous amount. He lost 815, most likely because of the Awakened Squads. But I mean, still, creating 400 units in a game like this is absolutely crazy in terms of just sheer numbers. Normally, you don't see anything quite that high. Normally, you expect to see something more like 100 to 200. 400, quite a bit. But at any rate, that'll pretty much be doing it. So Green Zero's economics really ended up winning him that game. And although he was hugely inefficient in the majority of those fights, and the tech was pretty much almost lying on Phoenix's side the entire time until the stealth tanks started to come out, Green Zero ended up winning out in the end. Nice control by both players, and really not, again, not like huge mistakes that I can think of by each player. But at any rate, that will be doing it. Thank you very much for watching. And of course, this is Sybert signing out.